Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Peter, and I help direct the events here at Strand. For a little bit of history, Strand was founded in 1927 by the Bass family over what was then 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled until after over 92 years now, Strand is the sole survivor still run by the Bass family and still housing new and used books. It is my enormous pleasure tonight to celebrate the launch of the 10th volume in the long-running and head-exploding Kramers Ergot series, edited by and featuring a spectacular long comic by Sammy Harkham. Since its inception nearly 20 years ago, Kramers has featured a wild variety of unique work from a vast array of contributors, and I'm thrilled to welcome Volume 10 to the shelves of the Strand. Joining him here tonight are several contributors to the 10th volume, Lale Westvind, Kim Deitch, Dash Shaw, David Collier, Christopher Forgs, and Connor Williamson. Also here to moderate things is Dan Nadel, author, curator, former editor of the Comics Journal, and founder of Picture Box. It is not often that we have such a crazy murderer's row of artists and illustrators, so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kramers Ergot 10 to the Strand.
Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Thank you all for assembling. You'll all be taken away now. But first we'll ask some questions, some relevant questions. I love this issue. I hope you all really enjoy it as much as I did and have been. Sammy does have a great comic in it. Everybody in here has really excellent work. Kim Deitch, I wanted to start with you tonight. Of course. Yeah, why not? Your comic includes memories of working with the cartoonist Spain here in New York, not that far from here, and putting together work for the East Village Other. And you were also yourself an editor of the anthology Gothic Blimp Works. Yep. So I wondered if you could just reflect a little bit about Spain, the Lower East Side when you were living here, and your own experience putting together anthologies of comics back then, and how that practice has evolved over time. I mean, you've been in so many, so go for it.
Yeah, well, you know, I didn't like being an editor at all. Does this work? You know, that was.
Does this work?
I don't think so.
Oh, no,
yeah. Oh, yeah. That was something that was pressed upon me by my boss, Joel Fabricat, at the East Village Other. You know, it drove me nuts having to reject people's work and all of that. However, moving on to a more inspiring subject, rooming with Spain, it was like this unbelievable postgraduate course, you know, in how to make art. Being around that guy for, I don't know, I guess a year and change. It was a total education. Plus we had, you know, wonderful wild times. You know, I wouldn't want to do it all over again, but you know, it was a crazy era, you know. Very happy to say I lived through it. And
was there any kind of schedule that you guys would keep?
Well, yeah, you know, if we had to have it together on Wednesday, paste up night at the East Village Other, or our ass was grass. It was as simple as that.
You had to have the comics there on Wednesday night?
Yeah, and be ready to work all night, and then somebody'd go over to the printer, you know, and watch the thing get printed.
So you would get to the East Village Other on Wednesday night, you'd do the paste up all night? Why were you?
Yeah.
You had to get there at 5 a.m.
Until the sun came up, then the printer's agent would come and pick whoever was picked to go with him and to watch the thing go through the press, make sure they didn't mess it up.
Did you ever go on press?
Lots of times, you know. So, you know, it was an education. I got to know all those people too, and, you know, made a point of making friends with them because, you know, that's part of how you do it in this business. You get to know who does what and cultivate your relationships, because you never know who you're going to be working with. So, you know, it was a wild time. It makes for great dining out stories, but the actual truth of it was such a wild, dangerous time. I was walking around with a knot in my stomach all the time, you know, and plus I was carrying a 5-shot 32 revolver in my jeans all the time, you know.
Where was the apartment you in Spain were in?
It was between B and C, right across from Tompkins Square Park.
Oh yeah.
And you know, we had all kinds of things like that with the neighborhood, you know, and I never would have chosen that, but like I say, it's very interesting. And if I had nothing better to do, I could tell stories about it all night long. But of course, I do.
Well, we've got an hour.
Well, well, what do you want to know?
Putting together Gothic blimp works. I mean, Sammy put this book together over the course of how many years? 3 years? 2 years?
2 to 3, I guess.
So how long would it take you to do a Gothic blimp works? Which, for those...
It was allegedly a monthly, but, you didn't always get out Johnny on the spot every month. I just get an old back issue of about the right number of pages, and I'd write each person's name in where the page was. It was really elemental and simple. And I had a wonderful agreement with my boss that I didn't have to show it to the publisher until it was printed. So I just do what I wanted with it. But, it was a lot of work. And what allegedly, I would, if I did my strip and did that, I was going to make $100 a week. But usually, editing the blimp, I had often not show up with my strip as a result. And, my boss would smile broadly and dock me, which I didn't blame him for. He had every right to do that, And, it was like Vaughn Bodie fled the city at some point, and suddenly there this magazine was without an editor. Spain had already gone to California, and so it's just like he was just looking at me. It's you, Took me over to his house. We smoked a joint together. He wrote out this informal contract, and there I was.
Sammy, how do you work with publishers? Is it similar?
Exactly the same. Without a gun in my jeans.
And Gary Groth?
We lift weights. We put a bomb in a refrigerator, watch Steve McQueen movies. Talk about Alex Toth.
Good. Yeah. So, Sammy, this is the 10th issue of Kramers. I know you're tired of talking about this.
No.
But please,
it's fine.
Regale us. What was the process of putting together this issue in particular? Because it is a slimmer issue than most. It's oversized, and it feels like a kind of meditation. A lot of the strips are meditations on the history of the medium or making comics. I mean, David's is a beautiful strip about comics. Kim's is about comics. Christopher's is about comics.
Well, all
the rest
comics,
of you just made comics.
All comics are about comics.
That's
the same way.
Well.
All movies are about movies. All books are about books.
Some are more direct than others.
There's. We've talked about this before. I mean, every comic is sort of, resting on the shoulders of all the comics that came before it, or the particular tradition that you feel a kinship to, and you want to sort of contribute to that world. I mean, David, you've talked a lot about that. Making work and connecting it to Harold Gray or Harriman and stuff like that in your writing. So there is that component always. The size and the page count are kind of linked together. Once you decide to go that big, like as far as dimensions, you don't want it to be too many pages just because it's too heavy and it's kind of unwieldy. So that automatically made it slimmer. And I don't know, in my mind, it was like I wanted it to feel like a big comic book, like a big annual. I wanted to get away from it feeling like a book. There's a title page. That's probably the only real concession made to make it feel like a book. But besides that, I wanted it to resemble like a big comics magazine. Like I almost envisioned it with like in a poly bag with cards in it or something, or with coupons stuck in the middle of it. I just wanted it to have that kind of energy. Yeah. So then slowly it changes a lot, the whole thing from beginning to end, like anything.
Yeah, it actually has an arc to it, the book.
Yeah, and you just sort of like, it's course correction, just endlessly going like, oh, this isn't what I expected, this is not what I expected, and things you just roll with it.
Christopher, I wanted to... You're looking at me like that. I wanted to ask you, I mean, your strip is very much about essentially the experience of writing and reading and sort of consciousness opening up of both of those things. And you're also a very experienced bookmaker. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how Kramers has changed for you over the years, because you've been in, almost all of them since number 4 or 5. And also just your own process of putting together books, because you just released a book about a month or 2 ago with die cuts, and that very much has a physical presence to it. I mean, you're pretty involved in making physical things that are also read and looked at. So a 2-part question for you, Christopher.
Well, I like to make books because they're like machines that are in places that you might not intentionally go. So it could be in someone's house, or you could come across it accidentally, which now is hard to do. Or, you have a guided, mediated experience with almost all of the culture, now, in one way or another, because of the numbers and things. So I like that there's a chaotic element where you might encounter it, the way that the pages flip, that there's 2 sides of it, and just experientially moving down the page and flipping the pages yourself, I feel like is an engaging, there's a physical rhythm, there's a re-decision over and over again to keep loving the story. Yeah, and then I've been making some things on long strips of paper and rolling them into scrolls, printing them with a receipt printer, and printing the same strips as pages or as one continuum has a radically different effect on the story and on the pacing and the spaces between the moments, and that's really magical too. So changing the shape of the book and the dimensions of the rectangle, like the last book that you were talking about was a golden rectangle with the opposing corners cut. I don't know, it changes everything about how you encounter the drawings, the space around them and everything. And you have so much control with the book. It's like a completely hermetic little world where you can absolutely control every little thing, much more than in real space. So those are just completely have infected me, the excitement of knowing that that's a possibility to make that. I think is going to be something that I'll engage with. So, I mean, there'll be more ideas. There are always more ideas than you have time for, and I think there's a lot of juice still in Kramers, because Sammy likes to keep himself interested by changing constantly. Sorry, this long monotone.
It's quite all right. Lale and Connor, I wanted to ask you. Oh boy. I wanted to ask both of you, as the youngest contributors to the current Kramers, but also, I mean, you guys kind of grew up with Kramers as a constant, more or less. So I was curious what your perceptions of it were as readers and now as contributors, and how you think it's kind of impacted the contemporary comics culture. And Dash, as the in-between age person, perhaps you can bring up the rear on that one afterwards. I'm trying to ask you all questions. It's hard.
I first encountered it mostly like online and peripherally, like I sort of vaguely was aware of it, and I was in a place where I couldn't like get copies of it easily. So I had a sort of like imagination of it, and like the way people were like talking about it seemed like very enticing and a thing I like wanted to get into knowing. And like when like that really giant one came out, what number was that?
7.
Yeah, when that came out, I had like seen a lot of things about it, seen a lot of people talking about it, but like wasn't really able to get anywhere near to a copy of it. Or like it took me a long time to like look at it, but I had like an imagination of it that like figured for a long time. And just knowing that certain artists were in it, I was able to like pursue them and like get interested in just the books other people were creating. But it was actually like physically really inaccessible. And it probably wasn't until like number 8 that I was actually able to like
Great issue.
read them and dig deep. And then I had to like find the other ones in libraries. And number 8 I really enjoyed because would have like still images, like 3D art and like historical comics, and blending that all together made like a deep sort of a sense to me in terms of like the different like categories and genres. In a lot of comics it felt like a lot less restrictive, it felt natural, it felt like an attempt to be like visually literate or something like that, and that's what sort of appealed to me once I actually did get a hold of it.
Hello. Yeah, I first saw it in art school. Somebody had it. I thought it was pretty cool. It was like a buffet of visual styles. You could flip through it. I don't think I ever read any of them. They look really cool. And I think it was always, I think the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, I would like to be in this. So, I don't know. It's nice to be on the cover, for sure. That was exciting. Yeah. Kramers has always been cool, as long as I've known about it. But that was maybe issue 6. I forget that guy's name that did the cover.
Okay.
I still really like
Helge
that.
Royman.
Yeah, I still really like
Yeah.
that cover.
Yeah. Dash?
To me, it's just like peeking into some alternate universe where comics like this could exist and be celebrated, and and it made it into our timeline, and I'm so thankful for it. And Sammy is such a master at creating kind of a context for each story and around the book itself, and it makes all the stories, like the first one where I saw it, the Kramers 4. It was like greater than the sum of its parts, it was so exciting and thrilling, and I thought comics were like from here, it was just gonna go to outer space or something. Like yeah, I wish it was. I mean, this is what we get in our reality of Sammy's vision of comics being this beautiful, moving, kind of diverse art form, but also with his, I'd say, like particular his particular flavor of weird I don't know how to say it.
Dash, I wanted to ask you about your story, which leads off the book, Policewoman. You've done a bunch of stories, kind of like based on syndicated TV shows, sometimes like game shows, and now you're doing Clue, which I highly recommend to everyone. I think issue 2 is out now.
Yes.
If you can find a comic book store that has one, that's good. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your story, because I just wondered where it came from.
That one isn't. Maybe there was a period where I was watching lots of. I didn't even see them on TV. I got them later. Actually, I would get DVDs of all of Blind Date episodes. And
this is from Blind Date?
No.
Oh.
Policewoman isn't from Blind Date.
Oh, okay.
And like Kramers 8 they're different. Kramers 8, I think people read it and just think it's a childhood predator story, but they're very altered. But I like it that it looks like it or feels like I didn't alter anything, because then instead of the question of
what's going to happen in the story, I feel like there's a larger question of like, why would someone draw this? Why would you just copy a blind date episode? But Policewoman, maybe it seems like that just because I was looking at a lot of that material for years, but and it wasn't inspired by that. I can offer like my only memories of it were I was at a writers' colony, the McDowell colony, and there was a week there where I was the only man, or at least the only man who was would hang out at like the porch where you have the dinners after you sit working, and it was all women of different ages and different races, and it was incredible. And I was sitting on the porch while they were all playing Fuck, Marry, Kill. Do you know that game?
Sure.
And it was just amazing, and I had this strong feeling that men aren't satisfying women.
You'd only just had that feeling?
Yeah.
I applaud you.
So I laid it out, sometime around then I laid out that story, and it's completely unrelated to what I just said, but that was how it came about.
Yeah.
And then I remember it keeps going from the job. It's like at work, after work, at work, after work, and that to be boring, but that was like the key to the story, because for a while I was like, do I make the work part a different color so we get it's a different work, or can I do it without writing at work, after work?
Right.
And then eventually I'm like, no, I can just label it at work, after work, because it goes back and forth a lot, like 2 panels, they're at work, 2 panels after work. Anyway, then when I figured that out, I thought, oh, I know how to do it.
That makes sense. David, I wanted to ask you, your strip in David, oh yeah, there you are. Your strip in the book is about going to the library to seek out another anthology of comics, the EC horror anthology that Nostalgia Press published in 1970-something, edited by Woody Gelman, who Kim might have known, maybe a little bit. And you've also contributed to, seems like almost every anthology of comics under the sun. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the role of anthologies in comics and how it's played out for you, but also how you've observed the anthologies changing. You also contributed a great bit to the Weirdo, the recent book about Weirdo, in which you said that you overheard a famous cartoonist calling it a pile of shit, which I relished and discussed with Sammy. So maybe
it was a long text thread about who possibly could have been.
Who possibly would have called Weirdo a pile of shit? So
maybe a flamboyant dresser. I don't know, but
a flamboyant dresser.
Oh. I did not say that.
No,
okay.
I'm saying my
But yeah, anthologies. There's a high degree of serendipity. Like even the Amtrak magazine. This is my reading from the train, actually, from Canada. So Upper New York State newspaper, beautiful. It's got like all the box scores from every baseball game the day before and comics. Like anybody can help this stuff to free reading material if they want. And the Amtrak magazine has this guy from New York, Jason Pollan, who wants to draw everybody in New York City, and it's all about the Taco Bell drawing club and stuff. So the serendipity of newspapers and magazines, just like all this different stuff. I think I was really impressed with Weirdo at first when I saw Carol Moskowitz's Wonder Woman strip. Anybody remember that one where she wakes up and she flosses her teeth and shaves her underarms and stuff, and then she's Wonder Woman, right?
It's a great strip.
Yeah, so the anthologies are a great way to meet people. Everybody here has signed this card to the guy who's made this appearance by me possible. This is a little ad. My publisher, Andy Brown. So everybody's sending a card to Nova Scotia to where he lives to thank him for my train ticket. And yeah, anthologies are great. I'm doing stuff for Mineshaft now, and that's a lot of fun. And yeah.
I'll tell you, Dan,
Yeah.
David was one of the first, was the only cartoonist who ever wrote me when I sent him a Kramers 1. And he
Really?
was so kind to me. I was like 18 years old or so. And to get a postcard from this cartoonist who I really respected was so, and it was so complimentary. And obviously the issue was very early work, as they say. Early work for bad work is early work. But he was so encouraging about continuing with comics that, you know, to have him in the issue was like, felt very personal, and it felt like a sense of closure to bring David in, and David like doing a strip about being a kid, connecting with older work, and I don't know, it was, David's like loom large, you know, and he's a continually surprising cartoonist.
Well, the thing about that strip in Kramers is, you know, I went back to the library where the old librarian worked,
She's still there?
and he's not there,
Hey.
but they were like, oh yeah, George Grant, you know, he's a very private man and stuff, but yeah, I've reconnected with him, and he sends me these beautiful embroidered Christmas cards every year. He's a lovely man, and
Retired?
yeah, you know, like he was like, you know, about my age when I was like, you know, 11 or 12, you know, and same with George Henderson, right? Like Memory Lane, he published Captain George's Whiz Bang and stuff.
Oh, Captain
Yeah.
George's Whiz Bang.
So
yeah.
the Toronto Library has a collection of
Great.
all his like
Yeah.
fanzines from like, you know, 1969
Yeah.
and 70, right? So
Great Bill Everett issue
yeah,
of. Yeah. Have you seen that?
So to find this stuff, to find like anybody can find comics now, it's so easy. But then, like, you know, 1975, 74, you really had to like. It was just like, I'd go into the card catalog and I'd look at all the dirt on the top because I couldn't spell caricature, really, but I knew kind of. That's the thing. Like with card catalogs, you can see by the dirt like where things are on the top of the card catalog, right? So I could find like all comics and caricature. All the librarians were thrilled when card catalogs disappeared. You can read the double fold by Nicholson Baker for more information about this. But everybody was just, yeah, we're rid of card catalogs. But these card catalogs were annotated by librarians over the years, and you know, cross-referenced and stuff. And when all the card catalogs got into computers, it was just like they were paying these companies like, I don't know, 5 cents a card. And so like these workers would just like type really quickly the bare basics of these card catalogs. So anyhow, it's just a thrill to be here. Honestly, I could just go on and on about like,
We're not done.
No, but like
Sail away.
coming
Are you
here
done?
through Northwestern, New York State, and
They're
like, the
gonna take it.
baseball. Like I love baseball as well, and like New York City was where baseball was invented,
I've been
as
thinking
well
about
as
getting
comics.
into baseball,
You know,
actually.
like it's just so beautiful. And
Are any
like,
of you
know,
into baseball otherwise?
Yeah.
I'm into baseball.
Yeah, oh,
did?
baseball is great. You know, just very relaxing to listen on the radio.
Yeah,
you know,
I've been thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Might go to a game. Christopher, you ever go to baseball games? All right. Yeah. Sammy, I wanted to ask you about Sherry Flanagan. There's a few great archival pieces in the book. Her works are among them, as well as let's see, a Gasoline Alley page and a one-off Blutch page, which is a sort of a kind of archival strip, and that he's doing a Mobius strip. But tell us about Sherry Flanagan, because this is the first time she's been published in decades, and also our friend Norman Hathaway is here tonight, who facilitated this current publication and and you know, it's moving along.
So I don't have much to say because I don't know that much. She was the cartoon editor of the National Lampoon. She did, you know, a strip in every issue of Trotz and Bonnie. And I had never heard of it, never seen it, I think, until you had mentioned it to me in about 2010.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
because you had mentioned
Guess
her
I'll
work.
take credit.
I think it was you. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure.
It was me.
And it blew me away, like the way it's drawn, the jokes, the sensibility of it. I mean, it's very, very bitter humor. It's very angry. It's drawn really well. It's an interesting dark strip, and it's very much of its time, right, Kim? When you say it's very much of its moment, it feels like a mid-70s strip about America.
There it is.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's one of them. And I've been trying to get her in Kramers since 2008. I through Norman, I got to reach out to her and talk to her, and I liked her a lot. She's a really great person, and it just didn't happen each time we tried to get it going. But so I'm happy to have a selection of her strips in this issue. I think she went into nursing. I think she works in the medical field because she was making comics about the medical field. And she was married. She was just hired to do that one? Okay. So I take that she does not work in the medical field at all. I don't know.
Has never even set foot in a hospital.
National Lampoon royalties? I don't know.
National Lampoon royalties.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what she does. But she was doing comics until, seems like, the early 80s. She was pretty consistent.
Kim, were you aware of the work at the time?
I knew her.
You knew her?
I knew her when she was married to Bobby London. And, she was all right.
Yeah?
Jolly, a little feisty.
Uh-huh.
Saw quite a bit of her for a while in San Francisco.
You like the work?
Sure. She can draw. I haven't thought about her in years. So I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, it's good.
In this
it holds
new
up.
issue too. It's an interesting person to have brought up after all these years. So I'm ready to take another look.
Yes, Norman.
Yeah.
No.
Know something about her now?
There's I don't know.
Seriously, I'd like to know where does she live and everything.
I think she lives in Seattle. Yeah, in Seattle. In her childhood home. And she has her archives.
Hopefully there'll be
a book in the future. One would hope.
Collecting the best of the strip.
Yes.
I think there's been interest for a while, and she hasn't been in a rush to do it. But it's happening. According to, I think Norman's going to be putting that together. So that's pretty exciting.
Her big artistic idol was H.T. Webster. She had a real passion for him.
For who? Sorry?
H.T. Webster.
H.T. Webster.
Oh, she loved H.T. Webster?
Yeah,
oh, wow. Great cartoonist. Observational comics. H.T. Webster. Huh. Interesting.
When a fella needs a friend.
Yes. Wait, wasn't that Briggs? Was that H.T. Webster? No. I don't know.
All these strips,
Can't remember.
Just, again, coming through Northwestern New York State and like Toonerville Trolley. Oh my God, that was my favorite when I was a boy. And just like you could hear the cicadas, reading that stuff, the summer. Like, this is just the best time of year. Oh my God.
Connor, how did you get here from Canada?
You took the train too?
Yeah, I took the train as well.
With David?
No, I hopefully.
No, you're on the Montreal
I didn't miss
train.
you. Yeah, I took the Montreal Express.
You took the Empire State. I took the Maple Leaf.
Yeah.
How was your ride?
Wonderful. There was screaming children, but I sort of zenned out. And
I wondered about your strip. Is this the mode that you're working in this sort of kaleidoscopic mode with no panels right now? And is your strip a section from a larger story, or is it?
No, it's self-contained.
It's self-contained.
The no panel thing is often I'll start something and the first page will be almost like a sketchbook page of various items that will then set the ground for what I'm doing next. And the not having panels was an attempt to be a bit more improvisational in terms of what happens next and squeezing things in, and the panels have to lead to some sort of conclusion on the page itself, and then broadly, and then also I just do it on the first go with a pen so that I'm not doing laborious.
So
I think it would be a mess if I did it in a pencil.
You're doing it one sort of moment, one panel one non-panel at a time.
Yeah, not purely I cheat sometimes, but to produce a comic that feels a lot different than I would do otherwise.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty dialogue heavily because I tended to notice that it sort of needed it to lead a reader through it somehow.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like as a result of what I was like choosing to do in terms of like drawing itself.
Mm-hmm. Huh. And are you at work on another book at the moment, or is it in production? Or?
Yeah, I have another book that's all done coming out in September from Kramers Press called Bradley of Him.
Cool.
About a guy going through like a identity crisis in a jog through a desert that relates to famous award ceremonies in the United States.
Okay, cool. Lale, I wondered about your comics that you publish yourself are usually so tied to printing, and you've made so many sort of masterfully printed comics. So I wondered how you translated that process into doing stuff for Kramers and doing the separations digitally and all that. If there's a difference, or if it's all just full speed ahead, and how you work as well.
The latter, I
full
think.
Speed ahead.
Yes. For whatever reason, the two comics that I've done for Kramers seem to be in the same line. They're kind of like my own version of pulp comics or something, but with female protagonists. They're pretty dark and nasty. I think I just felt like it was like a place where I could do that and it would be appreciated. And I think Sammy always wanted me to do some kind of color separation thing, but I always felt pressured for time. I probably could have done it for this issue had I known there would be some delays, unfortunately. It would have, but maybe if there's another chance. But I guess thinking in that older classic comic vein, that's definitely the primary inspiration for the printing color separation stuff. I think my first attraction to risograph as a printing option was the fact that I could replicate something of that with the different color separations, mainly limited, instead of CMYK, for those that you don't know, maybe lately I've been doing a lot of 3-color printing, so how many colors can you get mixing 3, and that becomes its own kind of puzzle. It has a very specific look, and I think it's kind of similar to like limited palette painting. I think it can. I don't know why it has more depth. I don't like, even though I'm very fond of like bright red, blue, and yellow, those primary colors, but I'm not such a fan of like the digital neon tone. That's pretty neon though, I guess. But yeah. I think that answers, right?
Yeah, that answers it.
You're the moderator.
Oh, I was looking at you for a cue of some kind.
I'll say something. Okay. I just want to point out, I hope I didn't embarrass you by pointing you out, but if anybody wants a collector's item, they could get
Got it signed?
John to sign this issue.
Jason. That's Jason.
Sorry.
Or John.
Because I'm going to pick up another one of these Amtrak magazines on the trip home, because like they're in every seat. So anybody wants this Amtrak magazine signed by the artist who's in it,
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's there. Okay, I'm not taking this stuff home, so there you go.
Anybody,
Yeah, so
please.
I didn't embarrass you, I hope, please. Okay.
Jason, right over there.
Jason.
Yeah. Dash, I was curious what you were up to now as well. I know you've got Clue coming out.
Issue 3 of Clue, the thrilling conclusion.
Yes.
All mysteries will be solved.
Great comic.
Great comic.
The 17th of this month. So then I'm going back and finishing the book that was actually in Kramers'
Oh, you are. Good.
9. So I had like a draft of it that I sat on for a couple years, and I'm taking out 30 pages and adding 70 new pages. So I'm doing that, and then I'm finishing a movie that I've been working on for many years that is about a crypto zoo that I hope will come out next year, but we'll see if I can finish it. That's what I'm doing.
Sounds about right. Okay. Sammy, so Kramers, you're almost done with this. What is that you're looking at?
David Collier's sketchbook.
Oh, okay.
I just thought I'd flip through it while I can. It's so good.
Ah.
That's from Singapore. I was there in November. I was at the Singapore Writers Festival, right?
Uh-huh. How was
And
that?
they had like my stuff on a screen, like a projection, but it didn't work, and I had the clicker here. And it was a bigger crowd than even tonight. It was like a Saturday night. And so for some reason, I took the clicker, right, and I threw it as hard as I could. It went all over the audience, right?
Yeah.
The IT guy at the back, and he made this stunning one-handed grab, right?
Wow.
And like the audience went crazy. It was
It's awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, Dan, what was your question?
I don't know. Any questions from the audience? There must be some question about comics or comics history,
They want us just to sign
comics philosophy,
books.
ethics, morality, firearms. You could ask Kim. Synthesizers. You could ask Christopher. Film, Dash. Printing, Lale. Anyone? Okay, yes, in the back.
So I remember back on Jeremy did 07, you said you're going to stop doing it.
Uh-huh.
31's the last one. It doesn't fear this. 31's the last one.
Sir, you live in fear. You live in fear of this.
Yeah, I live in fear I'm going to do another one. So between you and
So do I.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of hearing about it.
There's usually like a notion that seems worth pursuing, that seems, if I don't do it, it's not going to happen elsewhere. So sometimes it's an older strip that I don't know if is going to get reprinted or if there's something I know, because a lot of the work, I mean, publishers kind of know this, that some work only happens because there's someone to prod that person. You know, because they don't, most cartoonists don't feel like anyone cares ever. So if you can reach out, like, I think the most exciting thing in Kramers 7 for me was getting J. Bradley Johnson in there, who hadn't done a comic in over 10 years at that point, maybe longer. You know, and sometimes it just takes like asking, and you want to see stuff and you want to bring stuff out. And so, you know, with Kramers, a lot of it is manifesting stuff that wouldn't exist otherwise, but that's also what's hard about it, because I can say, oh, you know, it would be exciting to do a 14-page Tim Hensley, or to reprint a Julie Doucet comic from Comics 2000. She's got a comic in Comics 2000 that's never been reprinted. No, but you know what I'm talking about. It came out in 2000. It was 20 years ago now.
These
you know,
things
and so
haunt me too.
you start thinking about it and you get excited about those things, and it turns out that all the things that I'm excited about don't happen, right? They kind of fall apart. And there's a couple things that have come in that are like pretty good, but they need a lot of stuff around it to sort of really work. And all of a sudden you're begging people for months. You're just like begging all the time, and you're annoying everybody all the time. So this part of it's very nice. It's a real like pleasure to be with all these artists. I have so much respect for them. It's great to be in New York and to be here and see all these people. And so, like, of course, in this moment, I'm thinking, we'll definitely do another one. But for 2 years, like, it's like a very, you know, it's difficult, you know? If all the artists were already dead and I could just,
so much easier.
Right?
No, I know.
Because then I could just put it together and it would be easy.
The dead artists, as long as they have no family, it's easy.
Right.
So I prefer to find dead artists with no family.
Right. But you know, I also don't want to complain. It is what it is. But yeah, whatever.
Why did you decide to put your entire issue of Crickets in this issue of Kramers?
Two things. I thought the story wasn't like a narrative. It wasn't the impetus to do it was not a narrative. It was more visual. So I thought this little thing would probably work well at 11 by 14. And I thought, I don't know if it would be substantial for me as a single issue of Crickets. It seems like more like a bonus thing, like an extra thing. And it was initially thought of as like a 12-page interlude that would take me like 2 months. I was like, I'll just quickly do this. I'll throw it in Kramers. Yeah, it took a long time. Yeah. And it's not 12 pages. But, and, you know, of course I feel like an ass being the editor and having a very long story in it. I feel like it's kind of a douchey thing to do, but that's the nature of it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
It's a great strip.
Thank you.
I love the strip.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's fine. Listen.
It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. Just relax.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. And these artists will be signing your books.
Yeah, just stay here. Do you have more than one pen?
Yeah.
Can I borrow one?
If you do want to get your book signed, we'll try to line up over here, but there's a lot of people signing, so it might get a little messy. If you don't have any books and you would like to get some books and then get them signed, we have plenty of copies of, we have a couple copies of Kramers 10 left, and then a bunch of books by everybody in the back. You can ring up back there. Thank you, all of you, so much for being here, and thanks for all of you, to all of you for coming out. Have a great night.